Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you phase 1 of a flower bed makeover. So let's go. We're on the south side of my house and I call this my side walkway garden. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel like since this is the side of the house where everyone enters and exits my house, I really want this to look nice. And for years, this bed has been beautiful, but there are definitely parts of it that I'm not happy with. Since it's spring and it's raining a lot lately, I figured why not tackle this project? So we're going to do this together. I already started some of it, but I wanted to finish it with you. What I'll do is go over each section, what I'm planning to do, then I'm going to work on it, and I'll do close-up shots of small things like dividing and moving plants around. I'm going to start with this section of the bed, and towards the very front of the bed, that's what I worked on yesterday. And what I started doing was dividing my white Dianthus, and I'm basically alternating the white Dianthus, which is a perennial, with a white alyssum that I started from seed under my grow lights. And that's on the front of the border. And right behind that, I'm going to alternate with a hot pink Dianthus. That's the pattern that I have going on the other side of this bed, and I just want to repeat it all the way around on this bed. The next thing that I want to show you is over down in this section here, I have the pink larkspur, which bloomed earlier on in the spring. That was originally towards the front of this bed. I moved it back a little bit, and I'm just going to let it keep doing its thing. It basically needs to feed the bulb, so I'm going to keep the green growth on the plant until it dies back later this summer. And I also have some blue forget-me-not that is sprinkled all over this bed. When it goes to seed, it just goes everywhere. It's a biennial, but it's so pretty. So I'm moving that around, I'm tidying up the bed, and I basically have that sprinkled in amongst the pink larkspur that's there. And these beautiful plants, the foliage is so wonderful this time of year, and that's a woodland plant. It's called Bloodroot. It already went by, and actually after the white flower goes by, the foliage is just as beautiful. But it is overgrown, and I want to thin that out and move that around. When it goes to seed, it also just kind of goes to seed everywhere. So I will be pulling those out and moving those around in different flower beds. Next, I have a Creeping Phlox. You can see that it's huge compared to me right now. So it is a purple color, really pretty. And typically you want to divide and move your Creeping Phlox early spring or in the fall. Well, I'm not going to wait. I just really want to work on this flower bed. So I plan on dividing and moving this plant all around my yard. Next up, in this bed over here, on this side of the bed over here, I have a whole bunch of different perennials. And I really need to thin these out, clean this bed up, make it look tidy. And I'll go through some of these perennials as I work on them. Now let's move to the other side of the bed. So a few different perennials over here that I haven't talked about yet. I have some candy tuft right over there. I have another grouping over there. I have to admit I'm not very good about cutting that back. This year I'm absolutely going to shear it back after it has its first flush of blooms, which should be in a few days. Over here is more of the Creeping Phlox. Again, you can see it's huge. So plan on dividing that, moving that around. Right in front of me over here is the same pattern that we already talked about on that side of the walkway. The only difference is right over here, all of these are the hot pink Dianthus. So I plan on continuing to divide and move. So all of these will be divided in at least a half, if not in a third. And I'm going to keep moving them and continuing the pattern along that side of the walkway. And also, here's more of the Bloodroot. I'm not happy with the spacing of it. I think it's too close. Over there, I measured it. They're about 5 feet apart. I like that distance. So I'm going to probably take, I'll keep one grouping, remove a grouping, keep one grouping, remove a grouping. So I'm just going to kind of clean up this pattern that I have going here. I do like to grow in patterns of symmetry. I think it just looks nice. I really like the look of that. So that's how I plan on tackling this bed. In here is kind of a mess. It's basically a ton of Bee Balm. I love Bee Balm, and so do the hummingbirds. I just don't need that much of it in this bed. So I'll be moving that around, thinning it out. I have a ton of coneflower here. This is a purple coneflower or Echinacea. And I have a lobelia right here. I know I have other lobelia sprinkled in here. I love that. That's like a blue color, and that comes in the late summer, like near end of July, early August. So I'll be dividing that and moving that. So I'm going to get going on working on this project now. I'm going to show you how I divided my Dianthus, and then we're going to go ahead and plant it. So this is a pink colored Dianthus. It has a weed growing in it. So it's a good time to get the weed out while I'm dividing it. And I'm trying to be somewhat careful as I dig because I do have irrigation in this flower bed. And I just want to go around the plant the best that I can. When the plant is this big, it's definitely a good idea to use a large shovel. I can see that the irrigation line is right here, so I'm trying to be a little careful. All right, let's see if I can pry it out. And there's that wonderful weed. I'll deal with that later because the root goes in quite deep. So what's nice is the plant did come out in one big chunk. I see that the other weed is sticking in here. So I'm going to shake off the soil a little bit. And by doing that, it's going to make dividing this plant a little easier. Keep in mind the soil is really wet. We've had a lot of rain and we have more rain coming. I am seeing a good place where actually I can take a shovel and cut it. So I'm going to give that a try. So I have a bunch of pieces here. I really only need 2. I've already divided a ton today. So let's go over and let's get these planted. So these are the 2 spots where these 2 pink Dianthus are going to go. And you can see I had already dug some holes here. And the roots are just going to go just barely beneath the soil. You don't want the plant to be planted too deep. Just backfill around it. I would normally give these a nice good drink of water, but literally in a few hours we have rain coming, so I don't need to water them. All done. Next, we're going to divide the Creeping Phlox. I already divided a whole ton of it, but I wanted to show you how I did it. So the root system on a Creeping Phlox is actually very, very shallow. So I'm just barely going underneath the Creeping Phlox and lifting it. And then I'm just going around it and tugging at it to make sure I get the whole plant. I'm going to shake off some of the dirt. And in order to divide the Creeping Phlox, you basically just want to pull it apart. It's actually a very simple process. Let me go ahead and show you where we're going to plant these. I'm going to plant my Creeping Phlox in my backyard. The hole does not have to be too deep. The big thing when you're planting your Creeping Phlox is you want to make sure that the roots are under the soil and the rest of the plant is above the soil. So I like to take the plant apart. I know that seems like a pain, but I just want to make sure that I'm getting the part that's going to blossom on the top, because you can see that the roots are very shallow. So I'm just bunching everything together, making sure as I do that, the green part's on the top and the roots are on the bottom. It is a bit of a tedious process, but it is worth it in the end. And I realize I might be sacrificing this year's blossoms because I'm doing this during the mid-spring, but I'm actually totally fine with that. It's like making a flower bouquet. Sure the roots get in the ground here. Backfill. Fluff it up a little bit, and it's good. I'm going to work on the next one now. All done. Let's head to our other flower bed. If you can believe it, these pansies overwintered from last year. They dropped their seeds last summer, and I have so many pansies growing in this bed. So with that, I'm going to dig some and put them along my side walkway. The roots of the pansies are very shallow. Very easy to dig them up. Just going to take a couple. Okay, let's go pop these in. So I'm just adding these pansies for a pop of color, and I'm placing them in between this Dianthus in the back here, which is a pink color, and this pink Dianthus. They're not getting planted too deep, just enough. So nice when you can get a pop of color in your yard. And the best part is these plants were free. They didn't cost me anything. Okay, done. What we're looking at here is Bloodroot. What I like to do is keep this plant in check. It does seed itself here and there in the yard. So I'm going to go ahead and just tidy up this area and move these plants to a different area of my yard. A couple of things about the roots. They do go deep, so you want to make sure that you dig deep enough. You don't want to break them. And they look like this. And the reason they're called Bloodroot, if you actually broke this root in half, it has like a red sap to it. I'm going to go ahead and dig out a few more pieces just to tidy up this area. You can see I did break that one. It should be fine. The root is under there. It's just the plant will come back again next year. The larger, more mature plants are definitely harder to dig than the younger plants. I'd say that's pretty good. I still have a lot of work to do in here, but let's go ahead and get these planted in a different part of my yard. The plants are going to go just behind the Stelladora daylily. Because the roots go like this, I usually make my hole not so much in a circular fashion, but more so it's a little bit longer. And I just want to point out that's where the flower has gone by, and now the plant's gonna go to seed. And I'm okay with it going to the seed because I love to have bloodroot and I want plenty of it in my yard. And I'm going to show you quickly how to divide bloodroot. Right here, there's a small piece, I can see it. And I'm just going to gently pull it off. And when I do that, there's the root. You can see it's a good plant right there. I started with, I think, 1 pot of bloodroot probably 5 years ago. And now I have hundreds of bloodroot all over my yard. I'm going to shift over to the next daylily that I have over here because I have one big plant and I want to put it over there. So that's where we just planted the bloodroot. Over here, there's a bunch of small little baby bloodroot seedlings. Probably they will not bloom next year. So I figured why not put a more mature bloodroot back here, just to ensure we have at least one blossom in this section. Okay, that's looking good. Here I have Echinacea, or purple coneflower. And you can see in this area, I've been digging and trying to remove plants. Just trying to give it a little bit of a tug. Has a pretty good root system to it. And I just want to show you how I go about dividing it. Because this can be divided into a bunch of plants, but I'm going to divide it just in half. I'm literally going to just tug at it and pull apart. Now I have 2 good plants here. Let's go ahead and plant these somewhere. I already have some coneflower here. I'm just going to add to it. This I do want to dig a little bit deeper because it has a deeper root system to it. The key with most perennials, when you're dividing, transplanting, you want to make sure when you plant them that the roots are in the ground and that the plant, where the leaves start coming out of the plant, you want to make sure that they're level, that they're not too deep. You don't want the plant to rot. I have plenty of coneflower in this area. I'm going to go to one more area and plant some more. I'll meet you over there. So this area has a little bit of coneflower as well. I'm just going to add to it. Okay, let's go tackle our next plant. Some people consider bee balm and many other plants invasive because of their spreading nature. I don't mind it because I am very good about trying to control these plants, divide them, move them around. And if you do that for any plant, then it won't be invasive to you. I've learned that over time. All I'm doing here is just barely digging underneath the bee balm. It has a fairly shallow root, but I call it kind of like an underground highway system. It definitely roots itself here and there as it goes along. So I'm just taking chunks of it and digging them out. Let's go ahead and move these to other parts of my garden. In order to divide the bee balm, you just basically want to pull it apart. And the other option, other than pulling it apart, is you can break the roots off. And I'll show you one when I find it. Right here, you can see that the plant has rooted itself over here, and it's also rooted itself over here. So I'm going to go ahead, and now I have two plants and a third plant. So I'm going to go ahead and plant these pretty shallow. Big thing is to make sure that the roots are in the ground and that you just push down. root. I don't need all of this because I can see over here and here that there's already some root at the top. So I'm just going to break it. Okay, let's work on our next plant. Next, we're going to dig up some lobelia. It usually blooms later in the year, and it adds such a pretty color to it. I love the blue. It has a fairly shallow root system. A lot of times you can just start digging it and then pull it out. This is one of those other plants that seeds itself everywhere, but just makes more plants for you to divide and move around your yard. Okay, let's go ahead and plant this somewhere else in my garden. I'm going to go ahead and plant the lobelia right back here. Make sure the roots are in the ground. I'm going to show you how I go about dividing the lobelia. I'm basically just going to pull it apart. There, now I have two pieces. I could keep dividing this down to individual pieces, but I'm not going to do that. I'm happy with having a little bit bigger clumps. Easy peasy. All right, let's go back to our original flower bed. Phase one of this flower bed is done. I did a bunch of things. I had a pink larkspur that bloomed in the spring. I moved that a little bit towards the back of the front border. And I also have pansies that are around my yard that just came up from seed. And I planted a bunch of those in here. I had white alyssum that I started from seed under lights. And I sprinkled those along the front border. And also I have white dianthus and pink dianthus that are in the front border that I was able to divide off of other plants in the same bed. Then finally on this side, what we're looking at, we have the bloodroot, and I just thinned out the bloodroot and moved it to other parts of the yard. This nice empty spot in the center of this bed is where my creeping phlox was, and I'm so excited that I was able to divide that up, move it to a different part of my yard, and now I can plant other plants in this area. This area is clearly my phase two of this project, but I did get some work done here. I had some bloodroot that I thinned out and moved around in this bed. I also had bee balm as well as the echinacea and the blue lobelia, and we dug that out, and I still have a lot more digging to do in this area. I've had so much fun populating more plants into this one flower bed that's also on the south side of my house. This is where I put a bunch of the echinacea and the bloodroot, the bee balm, some of the pink larkspur, a lot of plants. So this is going to look so beautiful come summertime. I also have some Shasta daisy that was in here. So while I was at it, I divided that and moved that around as well. Please be sure to subscribe and like my channel. I want to make sure you don't miss out on any updates with these flower beds as well as my flower bed makeover that I'm working on. This flower bed is in my front yard, and I moved all of that creeping phlox down along the front of these flower beds down here. I don't know how many pieces I got off of that big, huge chunk of creeping phlox that I dug out and divided, but there must be at least 25 pieces that I was able to divide into chunks. And I think it's going to look so pretty down here in the front yard. I hope this inspired you. I hope it taught you that it's okay to go and divide plants, move them around your yard. And please stay tuned. I'm going to be sure to show you phase 2 of this project, which should happen pretty soon before the plants get too big. But until then, make it a great day with gardening.